Alright, we're good and we're back. So now that we've covered the striking criticisms, right? I think the grappling, honestly, the only negative thing is that they didn't really get in detail, but this is just a first look trailer, right? So ideally, I'd hope for them to get more in depth with this, but we're going to go with this, what they've shown us with the grappling system, and make a bunch of educated guesses on what we can see, right? So I did this in the live stream, so if you guys missed that 44-minute long live stream, this is going to basically be a shortened version of this. But if we're going to break down what was shown from us from the UFC 5 first look trailer with regards to grappling, what do we know? We know that it's now transition-based submissions and there's no more mini games, right? So what does that mean? So for quite some time now in UFC 2 and 3 and 4, we've known about contextual transitions, we've known about momentum transitions. So my guess, logically speaking, is that the game is now going to have to cater towards a direction where momentum and contextual transitions are going to be much more important. Because if there's no mini game and there's a bunch of, I remember prior to this game even being told to us, they're saying that there was 40 plus new contextual transitions in UFC 4, and most of us haven't even seen them. I mean, how many of y'all have been able to trigger the fireman's carry in that game, right? Or some of the denials in that game where you get a contextual denial if you go in this whatever direction, right? So if we're going to go and focus on here with this new grappling system, and I'm going to have the audio off, and we're actually going to go to the playback speed and turn it down to halfway so we can really get through this relatively smooth, right? So we're having a, backside. Oliveira is entering into the backside 50-50 position for like the leg lock, right? And he enters this position. So the first thing we're going to pay attention to, right, we're looking at the stamina, but not just the stamina too, what's underneath the stamina, and it is the submission bar. So this submission bar this is pretty much where our health is at in our striking HUD, right? We have a grappling HUD and a striking HUD. So being that it's there, the only logical assumption is that there's going to have to be some type of damage done to this bar. What determines how much damage is done, logically speaking, would have to probably come down to the submission, how strong the submission is, and how you enter the submission is the best logical guess based on what's presented to us in this trailer, right? And based on how it works in UFC 4. In UFC 4, the arm triangle from half guard is significantly weaker than the arm triangle from side saddle. Now, some positions that don't make sense in UFC 4, the back sitting rear naked choke is much stronger than a lot of submissions that aren't as strong as they should be. But if that is the direction that the game is going, I kind of like that a lot. But we have the submission bar. We don't really know what determines how much drain is that, but that's pretty much my educated guess on it based on what we see. But we have Islam Makhachev with a higher short-term stamina advantage than Charles Oliveira, who just entered this position. So it's showing us that the offensive fighter has the submission option from the top side here and another transition on the bottom here. And I'm assuming for the person who's on defense, we have a left transition here and probably another transition to here. But the Makhachev player immediately goes to transition to backside. So when he transitions to backside, I guess he beats out whatever attempt Oliveira is going for. So now Oliveira, seeing that this Makhachev is transitioning to backside, he tries to transition to side control. But ultimately, he ends up losing this transitional race, and he is unable to, flip him over to side control. Now we have another type of situation. Now here, we see the damage has been done already to the Casey. We don't know what type of submission it is, but we notice right here what we said before. There's two ways to go. Get up, backside, leg locks in here. So it's looking like for the offensive fighter, it's always going to be up to finish the submission, and then for the bottom, it's going to be whatever option that they have. For the person on defense, it's going to be left or right. Whether they have counters available for them, I don't know if we're going to be able to see that, but we have to go and play the game to find out. But here, Oliveira has a slight stamina lead, right? He has a slight short-term stamina lead as he enters into this leg lock position, right? And as he goes for it, right, a little bit of stamina is draining. The Mark DeCasey player tries to go for a get up maybe a little bit too late, right? So he goes for this get up, and as he goes for this get up, right, they're racing, and it seems to have been the wrong decision because right now the bar is now gone, and it's turned into a calf slicer. and Oliveira ends up getting the finish by tap out here. So that's something that's actually really cool to see, because now what's going to determine what? Are we going to see the top game versus bottom game, or the people versus what move level is this move versus the sub defense of this fighter right here? Like, how is the move levels going to affect how much gets drained here? How much is stamina going to play a role? Because we've been asking for the movement of the game to move much better on the ground. We need the short-term stamina not to matter as much. And ideally speaking, if this is what they're doing with the ground game, where it's going to be a lot more about racing and constantly moving and scrambling, that is what you want to do to really incentivize more players to move, as opposed to the very campy style we have now since UFC 2, 3, and 4 of just kind of waiting, and camping for the denial, right? So that's an interesting thing there, right? So we have two situations where they ended up in a backside 50-50 position, right? Just to kind of replay that back. In this case, Makhachev initiated the backside first, doesn't get denied by Charles. Charles tries to go side control, ultimately fails and gives up backside here, where he can probably try to roll again. Here, attacks the leg lock. They're already in the position. The case he tries to go for the get up, and it leads to a calf slicer, and he ends up giving up the tap. Now in the next film right here, right, Oliveira goes for the Kimura. And what happens here? He ends up reversing position, right? Now, it doesn't really follow up anything here, but look, you see right here, it says Kimura and knee on belly. So, and for Makhachev, full guard and backside. Full guard, I'm interested to see how that's going to work there. So, that's newer animations because his arm is stuck there. So, I'm kind of intrigued to see how this is going to work. But in terms of racing, because now, based on what we saw on the two clips before, if the Oliveira is like, okay, I got him in Kimura, let me go for the Kimura, and the Makhachev player opts to race, he has a higher chance to probably beat the Kimura because he has a higher short-term stamina advantage based on what we saw with the Makhachev winning the race prior with the backside, going backside against the side control transition, right? So this is really, really interesting. So from here, this is where it got really interesting. Now, a lot of people, it wasn't until the end of the stream where I caught this, but you're going to see this Kimura, right? And if you guys are familiar with, like, denials, like, this is a sign that it got denied, right? So, Tony Ferguson goes to the Kimura, so he's initiating a submission. And as he goes for it, Gilbert Burns is countering his submission with a submission. And actually ends up going to an armbar. And notice right here, the fight's actually not over, because Ferguson still, probably due to his sub-defense stat, or something along those lines, that's the only thing that makes sense, that a little sliver of a bars was keeping him alive against his armbar, right? Like, he's thinking about tapping, but doesn't tap, right? And what I realized is that this is not eerily similar, it's like pretty much spot on to how Georges St. Pierre took his first submission loss, right? We have Matt Hughes, GSP, goes for the Kimura, and Matt Hughes attacks an armbar, and it's over like this. If we can think about the number of title fights that we've had where the guy gets into the submission position and the fight is over like that, right? We'll say, like, relatively over like that if you're not able to defend. So let's say Alexa Grasso submits Shevchenko, right? She immediately took the back, ended up in that position off of that back take. Let's see if we can find something along those lines here, right? Right, she ends up getting in that position, and then it's pretty much a wrap from there. And she chokes. I guess we can't find anything that's gonna load. Actually, yeah, she ended up tapping her after she got the back take and everything else like that, right? Back take, off of the spinning, that shit whiffed. Look, immediately got into the position. So let's try to, like, think about it in UFC 5 terms, right? Like, that happens. They end up in back mount, attacks a rear naked choke. Did Valentino try to contextually go in one direction, ends up fucking up, and the choke got stronger? If I'm thinking about another situation, maybe Jiri versus Glover, right? Like, he submits Glover. He gives up the position there. He tries to go for a jumping guillotine, fails. He submits Glover to Shera. Let's see if we can find that image. Because I'm trying to, like, work with, like, how is the logic of this new system going to work? Because if that makes scrambling with the transitions, I guess we're not going to be able to find it here. If it makes it that much more important, then that's a really good step in the right direction. But yeah, we'll see this right here. He tries to go for the Kimura, gets countered by the armbar, and his bar's already halfway, but he's able to survive off a sliver. And it's definitely confirmed that he survives there because it's still there. This is right here. Whereas when the Casey gets submitted, let's see it's different. I know it's different. It's a wrap. Like the bar just blinked and it's pretty much donezo right then and there. So the other thing that I'm hoping with the grappling, so if this is going to encourage a lot more movement on the ground, that is a really good step in the right direction. What I'm also hoping is that the grappling, it definitely attacks more. Like it actually has an effect on the arms. Like, you know, you're seeing guys with fully extended arm bars in UFC 4, and they're like fine right after. You saw Tony Ferguson, even though he didn't tap to some submissions, his arm was done after Charles Oliveira extended it. Right, he couldn't move the same after Beneil Dariush freaking heel hooked him to God knows yonder. Right, so we want these submissions to actually have an effect on their attributes as well. And if we're going to be talking about, you know, also the new scoring system or whatever, you know, now that there's draws and whatnot, you know, the game was talking about draws, and I was mentioning it in the striking breakdown, that how is the grappling going to play a factor when it comes to the draws. And I'm kind of, something I don't like here is that their model, Pantoja and Moreno, their models are too big. Herb is like 200 pounds, 6-something feet and whatnot, and these guys are way too big. Yeah, that's a bug that carried over from UFC 4. They need to fix this because these two guys are significantly smaller than Herb Dean. But anywho, how is the grappling scoring going to play a part into the next series of this game, right? Like, is it going to reward aggressive submission attempts? Because now you're actually doing a ton of damage on somebody else, right? You're seeing these icons pop up where the foot is getting hurt, where the arm is getting hurt, right? Like, we're seeing all of these different results, right? Let's see right here. Right, he counters the Kimura with the armbar, and look, it doesn't immediately go for the armbar. Like, he goes for it, but Tony Ferguson, see right here, he has these two options. Like, both of them say side control. One of these has to be the correct option or something, and it ends up, you know, he still has a chance to try to race this armbar, and I'm liking the direction where that's gonna go. Because character matchups are going to matter a lot more. And look, that's, I don't know if that's the bicep or something, but that's arm damage. You know, I think it's the arm holding itself up like that. So, there's definitely more positive things to say about the grappling than what was presented with the striking. Even though, with what the real impact system shows us and the damage and the cuts and Dr. Stoppage is a really good thing. Me personally, especially as a grappler, I'm more excited to see how the grappling's going to work. Because I've always complained that the grappling has been a little bit too static. A couple positions definitely need some nerfing since UFC 4, and I'm hoping that they actually do that. I'd also say that they need to touch up on like takedown entries, what the term is, what for takedowns, making more of the stats matter. Because on UFC 4, the most high percentage way to take somebody down is usually taking them to the cage and backdragging them, and this can work with almost anybody because they'll have access to the turns from there as well. And in UFC 3, one thing, like, y'all know I don't give UFC 3 too much praise, but I'll give them this. You felt the difference. If you shot a takedown with Nick Diaz and then you tried to shoot a takedown with Kamaru Usman or GSP, the distance that you covered with Kamaru Usman and GSP was significantly different than with Nick Diaz. Granted, takedown counters ruined that game, but the distance was there because they had such a significant difference in takedown offense. And if the game is leaning towards this direction, you really want to make that stuff matter, because now you can't have people camping too much on a specific block. I know there's a lot of suggestions I already have like in the back of my mind. A couple of things I like what I'm seeing. I like what I'm seeing. But we're gonna have to see into the beta. Obviously, it's going to be a closed beta, so nobody's really gonna be allowed to show anything unless somebody magically gets permission from EA or something. I don't know. But when the beta drops, like, I'm gonna be really excited to see how it's going to be, and then of course the finished product and how they're gonna handle it from there. But that's gonna be it for the grappling portion of this, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. We gotta upload this Alexa Grasso and Valentina thing before they end up fighting tonight. So yeah, it's a breakdown on this as well. I'm Santino. I appreciate y'all. I'm out of here.